Does the punishment fit the crime? It's a question we seem to hear often these days. With all the things happening in our country presently, we seem to hear and see acts of brutality by all kinds of people daily, accompanied by minimal punishments and little to no jail time. On the other side of that coin, there are those who are thrown in prison for very long sentences for nonviolent and generally harmless crimes. Our justice system could be broken, and today I'd like to explore how. How is a nonviolent crime, like smoking weed, so terrible that a person, a human being, deserves to be put in jail at all, much less for 10 plus years? Short answer, it's not. Still, over 50% of our prison population are inmates who have had drug offenses, and another 10% are in for other nonviolent crimes. The primary culprit in all of these arrests is the war on drugs. This ongoing effort to mercilessly and cruelly police the people of this nation over what they choose to put into their own bodies has dipped deep into our national treasury and continues to take money from the taxpayers needlessly. Even worse, all of the expenses of the so-called war do not stop at the cell door. Who pays to keep people in prison? Oh, that's right, us, the taxpayers. Why on earth are we expected to continue to shell out billions of dollars every year just so the government can make our lives hell? Because we keep on doing it. This is just one of the many issues with our justice system in this country today. Even the President of the United States himself has acknowledged this in recent years. At President Obama's speech at the NAACP annual convention earlier this year, he said, "Today I want to focus on one aspect of American life that remains particularly screwed by race and by wealth, a source of inequity that has ripple effects on families and on communities, and ultimately on our nation, and that is our criminal justice system." He went on to speak about some of the troubles with our justice system, and the obvious racial and class bias in modern prison sentencing. In regards to the racial and wealth bias of the system, he remarked, "What has changed, though, is that in recent years the eyes of more Americans have been open to this truth. Partly because of cameras, partly because of tragedy, and partly because the statistics cannot be ignored, we cannot close our eyes anymore. The United States houses a mere 5% of the population of the whole world, while still having a whopping 25% of the total incarcerated. The incarceration rate in the United States is one of the highest in the world, beating out the likes of Russia, China, and Turkmenistan. The total number of prisoners in our cells has ballooned beyond the growing population. In 1980, the United States had 500,000 people behind bars, while in 2015 the total has reached 2.2 million. This is an absurdly high number of people behind bars given our population numbers. President Obama, in his speech at the NAACP, also addressed those who ought to be behind bars.
Now, we need to be honest. There are a lot of folks who belong in prison. If we're gonna deal with this problem and the inequities involved, then we also have to speak honestly. There are some folks who need to be in jail. They may have had terrible things happen to them in their lives. We hold out the hope for redemption, but they've done some bad things. Murderers, predators, rapists, gang leaders, drug kingpins. We need some of those folks behind bars. Our communities are safer thanks to brave police officers and hardworking prosecutors who put those violent criminals in jail.
He points out that we hold out hope for redemption of those that have done wrongs, but sometimes that redemption is not possible. There are those who cannot be rehabilitated, and keeping them behind bars is good for the safety of the people. This statement by the President shows he is aware of the problem, at least a large part of it, and may take steps to further help in the future. But after talking about the good of the system, he also addressed the bad. He highlights one of the most important issues currently in our justice system.
But here's the thing. Over the last few decades, we've also locked up more and more nonviolent drug offenders than ever before for longer than ever before. And that is the real reason our prison population is so high. In far too many cases, the punishment simply does not fit the crime. If you're a low-level drug dealer or you violate your parole, you owe some debt to society. You have to be held accountable and make amends. But you don't owe 20 years. You don't owe a life sentence. That's disproportionate to the price that should be paid. And by the way, the taxpayers are picking up the tab for that price. Every year we spend $80 billion to keep folks incarcerated. $80 billion. Now, just to put that in perspective, for $80 billion, we could have universal preschool for every 3-year-old and 4-year-old in America. That's what $80 billion buys. For $80 billion, we could double the salary of every high school teacher in America. For $80 billion, we could finance new roads, and new bridges, new airports, job training programs, research and development. We're about to get into a big budget debate in Washington. What I couldn't do with $80 billion. It's a lot of money. For what we spend to keep everyone locked up for 1 year, we could eliminate tuition at every single one of our public colleges and universities. As Republican Senator and presidential candidate Rand Paul has said. Oh, and to his credit, he's been consistent on this issue. Imprisoning large numbers of nonviolent drug offenders for long periods of time costs the taxpayers money without making them any safer.
Everything the president says in this quote is absolutely correct. The war on drugs is helping bankrupt the country and locking up resources that could be used elsewhere, like possibly preventing police brutality through proper training and evaluation. All of these evidences point to one simple conclusion. Our justice system is broken, from the top to the bottom, and there is little being done to fix it. We as a people must make sure our voice is heard and put a stop to these practices. As our politicians have shown that they cannot be trusted to police themselves, we must do it for them.